Recent Reads Volume 1. Hi. I am back. This is my second video today, so I'm filming 2 videos today. Look at me, I changed and shit so you couldn't tell. But, I'm gonna talk about some recent reads. First, I want to talk about the Dreamblood duology by N.K. Jemisin. I read the first one back in June, but then I read The Shadowed Sun this month? Yeah, this month. With Elena from... with Elena from Elena the Great. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I buddy read this with... I'm just gonna double check, because this is embarrassing.
Hey, I'm Elena. This is Elena the Great, and today...
Elena! So, I read this one by myself back in June. I read this one this month with Elena. And wow, this book is so good. I already kind of talked about it in another video. I'll link it up above, but I'll just briefly reiterate that this takes place in like an Egyptian-inspired world. It doesn't take place on Earth, so it's not actually Egypt. It's like sci-fi fantasy. But it takes place in a city called Gujarat, and it follows Injiri and Edu and a woman called Sudnandi, and it deals with like intertribal politics, it deals with colonization, it deals with religion, it deals with so much. The 2 of the main characters, Nijiri and Edu, are what they call gatherers, and so they like collect the souls of people the city has deemed corrupt. And gathering souls is basically like killing the person and sending them off to the land of the dead. And Nijiri loves Edu, and it's just like a whole bunch of pining in the middle of like political drama, and it's so good. And then the next book takes place like 10 years later in Gujarat, but after everything that's already happened in book 1. And so because of everything that happened in book 1, you don't necessarily follow the same characters. They make appearances, but I'm gonna say the main focus is on Hanani and Tianet and Wanahoman. And Hanani and Wanahoman did not fucking disappoint. That's all I'm gonna say without spoilers. I think I might do like a dedicated book talk for these with spoilers. So if you're interested in that, I'll get to it when I get to it. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not gonna make promises. I'm a new booktuber and I got mental health issues, so I'm a new booktuber who's also trying to look for a job in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing is going well right now. Who knows if anything will ever upload again. I'm clearly in the middle of an existential crisis. So, in this book, Elena and I ended up talking a lot about sexuality, what it means to write like war-driven plot in fantasy, and how this book kind of flips it on its head. I don't know how N.K. Jemisin does it, but she's amazing. Trigger warnings for rape and incest. I think I'll like leave the information for it in the description. There's rape and incest in this. It's not a fun time. Like 2 Hanani experiences an almost rape, and then Tianet does experience rape from her father. So if you're worried about that at all, I'll leave the pages so you can skip it, because it doesn't necessarily need to be read to understand this story. But I highly suggest picking up this series. It's so good. The discussions on gender and religion and society are just great. N.K. Jemisin just fucking kicks ass every time. The next book that I want to talk about is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. I sobbed so much with this story. I briefly talked about this in my July wrap-up. I'll link it up above. And like, I briefly talked about how I felt about each of the novellas in this In this movie? I wish. In this story. Follows Binti. She's a Black Indigenous woman. Not woman, she's 16. Who is leaving her ancestral lands and going to university. But then on her way to the university, shit happens, and then the rest of the novellas kind of kick off. I really enjoy the discussion of ethnicity, identity, what it means to be X ethnicity, what it means to hold prejudices against ethnicities that aren't of your own. I think Nnedi Okorafor did a really good, like, representation of, like, the colonizers and, like, the Black Indigenous people, and then book 3 went even more into, like, the stereotypes against Indigenous people, and it was just, it hit me so hard. This was, like, so good. When I talk about how Indigenous lit doesn't have a lot of joy in it, this is one that does. Except it's not just straight Indigenous, it's Black Indigenous, specifically not African American. Specifically Indigenous to Africa. So, like, our experiences are not the same, but before I even Googled what Himba and, like, what they were doing, what they do with their hair and stuff like that. Before I Googled, like, to double check the Himba for myself, because, like, I'm pretty sure I heard about them before, it's just, like, they're never named in these documentaries and stuff, because white people are lazy, clearly. And so, when I heard her talking about, like, her hair and the land and never leaving the land, I was like, oh my gosh, she's Indigenous. And then I Googled it and I was like, she is Indigenous! Yeah! Oh, I gotta cut that out. My shirt flew up and my titty came out. So, yeah, it was just really good. I highly suggest you check it out. It's like sci-fi, but not like heavy sci-fi. Please just read it so I can talk to someone. The next duology that I'm going to talk about is Strange the Dreamer. My boyfriend is currently reading these right now. No, wrong book. He's like almost halfway through Muse of Nightmares. He really likes it. I absolutely love these books. When I did my Starless Sea review, I hadn't read these yet. Why didn't I read these at this point? I think I'm going to do specifically like a spoilery talk on these two books. Because I feel like everyone's read them at this point, and I left a relatively non-spoilery review thingy on like my July wrap-up. No. Anyways, this follows Laszlo and Sarai, and I really liked it because it's super whimsical and magical and lyrical, and I don't want to give away the plot if you haven't read this yet, because going in blind is the best way to do this. If you do end up liking it, please DM me. I want to talk about these books for forever and ever. But I'm not going to like talk about these because this is a white author in the midst of a bunch of authors of color that I have. So if you want to hear more about this, I don't care. I'm probably going to do it anyways, but in a separate video. Why did I bring these up? I love them. That's all you need to know. I'm just gonna bring these up every time I talk about books I like because I just reread Strange the Dreamer and I love it even more. The next book is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I am not one for horror, but wow, this book really fucking did it to me. I'm never gonna be able to look at mushrooms or mold the same again. When I first, I think it was on chapter 8 when I tweeted that this book felt like it made me as uncomfortable as Hereditary, but it gave me like Haunting of Hill House and Get Out vibes, and then I got to chapter 22 and I was like, my brain, the power of prophecy in my head, I nailed that description. This book is fucking next level. I don't know how Garcia did it, but she did it. It was so gross, so graphic, so horrifying. The last 80 pages I was just rolling on the ground, groaning in like disgust and anxiety, and my boyfriend had to put on fucking headphones to ignore me because I was that, like, obnoxious while reading it. If you like Asian horror and you like the slow creep, and I haven't read The Only Good Indians yet, but I've talked about it with a few people and they said it's similar to like Japanese horror as well. So I think if you like those kind of books, you'll definitely like this. Trigger warning for incest and rape, abuse, gore, horror, the usual for like horror novels. It was so good. I really liked how Noemi didn't like lose herself in the house, if that makes sense. Like, she almost did, but she didn't. And then she managed to still get shit done without sacrificing her integrity, her morals, her sanity. We love it. I love Noemi, and I kind of wish that she ended up with, I think his name's Julio, the doctor, instead of who she did end up with, because why? Why would you date a white man after everything that happened to you in that house? Like, why? Don't trust white people. That's the lesson of this story. Don't trust white people. Anyways, my boyfriend's on the way back, so I'm gonna stop recording now, especially because my battery is at 12%, so it might stop recording for me anyways. I know, I'll probably do this again once I finish some more books before my next wrap-up, because I just like talking about books I like versus books I don't, because there's some books that I fucking hate this month, and I am nervous to talk about them because they're written by like young authors of color, but they have some really, really harmful shit in them, so I don't know. If you like science fiction and you want some African futurism, read Binti. If you like fantasy and you want some Egyptian-inspired dream magic, read the Dream Blood duology. If you want your heart ripped out, torn to pieces, and then left, read these books. And if you feel like getting the shit scared out of you, read this book. And so those are all my like recent favorite reads that I really wanted to talk about at this moment. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.